Thank you. Welcome, TEDsters. This is Éscape from the Maddening crowd, my little how-to chat on how to grow ourselves smaller, smarter, and more social. Not just to survive our crazy modern times, but to actually thrive, to do better than we have been doing. So let me unpack this problem just a little bit. We live in an era of mass, or we have been living in an era of mass, fueled by mass population, which is a mass culture, which has been bred by mass media, which is funded by mass marketing, which is there for supporting mass production, which feeds our mass consumption habits. And hey, that's great, right? Mass is best. Except we start thinking about all the mass destruction that comes with that. And we can thank these nice people. Never get me wrong, we've got a lot to thank Don Draper for, but we have been programmed by the mass media generation to think, what is happiness? Well, it's that moment before we need more happiness, which turns us into shoppers! And that's been great, right? Like, with how we've been resilient in the past, we just went shopping, it made us feel better. But if we're going to start an idea about ideas worth sharing, let's talk first a little bit about one that we should stop sharing, right? Mass culture and mass consumption as the solution to all of our economic woes, right? The economy's down. What do we need? We need people shopping more. Okay, in the 16 years I've been in Asia, and I'm sure many of you have been in this part of the world for some time and have seen it evolve the same mass culture that we found in the old countries that we've come from. Shopping malls sprouting up everywhere, people buying big brands. And oh look, we also got these things, right? Mass dumps. Have a look at that picture. Try to remember that. We're going to come back to that one at the end. So, put simply, mass consumption of the West currently uses up pretty much all the resources we have. If we keep going with this, exporting this idea of mass culture and mass consumption, we end up needing 5 planets, which currently we don't have. So a little bit of radical resilience thinking needs to take place. Now, I'm going to stop right there on all the consumption stuff. I'm inviting you to listen to people like Gabrielle Kirsten, Feeding HK. She's going to talk a lot about the things we can do here locally to prevent so much food waste from ending up in the landfill. Also, please check out Annie Leonard's work on stuff. She's got a great site, stuff.com. And there's a whole package there for screening her wonderful movie about consumption. I'm hoping that some of you can come and talk to me after it if you're interested in this. I'd love to set up a screening and we can continue to talk about consumption sort of going forward. But right now, we're going to reboot. We're going to reboot, turn off the computer, turn it back on. Solves all the problems, right? Well, we're going to do the same thing with our cultural outlook today. We're going to get you all to switch it off right now, and we're going to try and reboot it with sort of a new and improved way of thinking. All right, so this is a brain hack. Viktor Frankl, Search for Meaning, the man who inspired Bess Hepworth to put this wonderful TEDx program together today and invite many of our wonderful speakers. The quote I like sort of from him and where I'm trying to get us to think today is if we're no longer able to change the situation, like get 5 more planets, we're going to have to change the way that we think about ourselves. We're going to have to change ourselves, change our own thinking. Also, I invite you to check out Dr. Patakos, his book titled Prisoner of Our Thoughts. It's exactly what we are right now. We are prisoners of the mass culture thought pattern. And we have to escape from this somehow. Now, I'm guilty of mass thinking. I shop, therefore I am. I was in one of the busiest shopping malls in Hong Kong, a place called Times Square in Causeway Bay, one of the busiest shopping districts of Hong Kong, on one of the busiest days of Causeway Bay, the Rugby Sevens event. And I had to ask myself, what am I doing here? We're born into this way of thinking, this mass culture. I'm looking at these people, they're shopping for fun, leisurely, a crowd of millions of people in a day. We should be doing something else. But more is better, economies of scale, sell millions, get rich, right? That's what we all have been trained to do. And don't get me wrong, I've got one of these things. If it could sell like millions and make me rich, I probably wouldn't give the money back. But let me tell you, like where this journey began. This book was originally going to be called Story, Audience, and Influence. And this is because I come from a mass media background. I'm a print journalist. I worked in magazines where, you know, the more eyeballs we could get, the better. But as I began sort of my journey through social media, I realized we've got to stop thinking about people as an audience. Right? There's masses of people that we break into demographic segments. It's madness, right? Social media isn't the same as mass media, right? It's different, and that might just be our ticket out, right? If we can stop thinking like people from the era of mass and start thinking somehow as the people from the social era, we might be able to escape. But how? All right, there's a brand new book out by one of my favorite media theorists, Douglas Rushkoff. It's just been out last week, called Present Shock, When Everything Happens Now. And he breaks this down into the modern condition, into a whole bunch of sort of symptoms. One that he calls Apocalypto. And it's this like consumer demand for the end. Like we want things to just stop, please stop. Which means we're like more happy to dream about the zombie apocalypse than we are about how we're going to manage our Twitter account in a year's time. And this, anybody here old enough to know what this is? Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, Grizzly Adams. This is my father's favorite show when I was growing up. This idea of escaping from the maddening crowd isn't new. Grizzly Adams was falsely accused of murder around the turn of the previous century and went off into the woods, befriended a bear, and lived happily ever after. This was posted on YouTube, of course, by a man who goes by the name of Love Protocol. And he talks exactly the way that Douglas Rushkoff, he's a great example of what Douglas Rushkoff's mentioning with Apocalypto. He's like, look, the anti-establishment movement's back. We want to go back to nature. Yay, let's all band together and live in harmony and togetherness out in the woods alone. Look, the world does not need 7 billion people running off into the woods and like befriending grizzly bears, okay? We can't do this. We can't just unplug from the mass culture, right? There isn't a quick escape. I still have to go to Times Square if I want to buy new sports kits so I can get fit. I wish I didn't. I wish I could somehow source it locally and have great stuff and it not come from like all the global thing. And I wish I could, but like, we are kind of stuck with this right now. So we have to find a solution, a way through the problem. We have to figure out how to reconnect to each other differently. And to figure out how to do that, we need to look back. You know, there was a time before the era of mass. Most of us are far too young to remember what that was. We were all born into the age of mass. But people lived for some time before the era of mass. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we need to go back to, you know, the way things were in the 16th century. Times were tough. But people did have a strong sense of community. We had the ability to source locally. It's in fact, that's the only way we could source things. We were all makers. And we also lived by this thing called the Dunbar Number. Now, you may have heard of this number. It's becoming quite popular in organizational structures and how we organize ourselves. It's basically the idea that our brains are limited to being able to make a maximum, and I mean maximum of 150 active connections, relationships. And if you had 150 active relationships going, you wouldn't have a lot of time to eat or sleep, and Arianna Huffington would be after you. Realistically, we're all much more below 100. In fact, most of us are somewhere in the 50s if we really were to look at it. And I don't mean like that means it reduces your whole Rolodex to that many, but in terms of the number of people you really deal with That is all we really do. Still, despite how big of cities, Hong Kong, 7 million people, you don't know all 7 million. And I don't care how many friends you have on Facebook, you don't talk to them all, right? This is Robin Dunbar, the man who gives us his name to the Dunbar Number. It's his book, How Many Friends Does One Person Need? I invite you to read that. He's an evolutionary psychologist, very interesting sort of perspective on the way out of the era of mass. So, quickly, recapping the problem. Mass population, mass culture, mass media, mass marketing, mass consumption, remember the dumps. We got to get away from this. We need to reconnect in a different age. This is the social age, and this is how we're going to escape and get back to the values that we cherish. Now, what do we value? What do we value in this era, right? Do we value homogenized stuff? No, we like limited edition. We don't want something everybody else has. We want stuff that's bespoke, not off the rack. We want custom. We love handcrafted, small batch, boutique, exclusive, and more than anything, relationships. That one-to-one experience of being able to go into a shop and they know who you are and they treat you with like respect and dignity and friendship. That is the values that we want in life. And those are the values that we can find in the social age. But we've got to go out and find these things, right? We live in a great time. We can build communities anywhere, right? Google+, LinkedIn, Facebook, or if you really want to find real people in the real world, meetup.com. Come to TED events. There are so many ways to find your community today. You don't have to go online or go to the shops and buy mass. We can source local online. You can get almost anything now. You can even make stuff. If you don't have, if you've got the ability to get your hands on a 3D printer, we've got some of the best 3D printer tech companies starting up right here in Hong Kong. And now, not the world needs a lot of 3D Yodas, but the beauty of this is if you need one, you don't have to buy something mass-produced. You make one, you use it for what it is, you recycle it back into pellets, and you make something else out of it again. We can be makers just like it was before. This is a hyper-social connected era. Now, I know a lot of you feel like this, right? You go online, and it's like drinking from the fire hose. But we can actively choose, right? Like Viktor Frankl said, right? Make the choices. Don't just be programmed by the madmen. Don't just accept this is the way the world is and I'm going to follow along. You can say, no, I'm going to this community and I'm going to pick and choose who I want to have in my community. Welcome to the Google Grumpy Cat community. I'm not in it. I've actually had the rare fortune of meeting Grumpy Cat. It's actually a she and not as grumpy as you might think. So here's my big idea. We're going to put the radical in resilience, okay? And now this is going to be hard for some of you who've been working like forever to build up your Twitter following and get lots of Facebook friends. But I'm challenging you all, after today, to start looking at your lives like a Dunbar portfolio. You have 100 relationships max in your life. Treat it like a stock portfolio, right? Consider carefully who's in your portfolio. You want quality over quantity, right? You want to manage the portfolio to improve its performance. If people are underperforming, you're going to have to choose to replace them with somebody who's, I don't know, more local, more healthy, more neighborly, more positive, more whatever it is that you want in your community. Reconnect with just those of your choosing. And when you feel like it's starting to get too big, too many people, you're starting to feel those pressures of that fire hose, that's a great time to sort of look at your portfolio. Who can we clear out? Let's make some more space for ourselves. So this is the solution, right? We choose to filter out the masses. We still have to live around them. We don't have to talk to them all. We can begin to build the world we want rather than the world that is dictated to us, right? Smaller, smarter, more social, more resilient, and more human. And that's the real trick here. Rise of social business. This is Abby Mueller. I met her at a TEDx about a year and a half ago. She's a 5'3", stiletto-wearing, Python code hacking seamstress who's revolutionizing fashion by bringing technology and couture together. And she believes in slow fashion. And her grandmother taught her a line, which apparently a lot of grandparents taught their kids. Mine didn't. I love this line. I give it to you as a gift. We are too poor to buy cheap, right? This planet can't afford to keep buying crap that we have to throw out again. We have to buy stuff that's quality. We have to find relationships that are quality. It means we need to find businesses that we do business with who are people-centric, who care about us, right? Who are in it for the long haul. This rehumanization of business is so important, right? Wallet share replacing market share. I don't want to go to a business that just wants to get bigger and bigger. I want a relationship that wants to deepen its relationship with me, that wants to think about the lifetime value of me, not just what this purchase was at the till. I want to make loyalty more about something more than just money, about sticking through with each other through hard times. And now, remember this picture I showed you in the beginning? So this is what happened to me when I started to clear out my portfolio. For those of you who don't know, I amassed 100,000 followers on Twitter. And yay, hooray for Jay. And that seemed like really cool at the time, especially because I came from an era of mass. But then it started to become quite overwhelming. Like, I can't deal with all of you people. What am I doing? This is madness. So over the last year or so, I started clearing out and started getting more focused on more local relationships with more real people, spending less time online and more time offline. And it's been a really great thing. Part of the experience, the way the universe has conspired for me as I started to clear it out, it made room to meet this man named Scott Neeson. Now, he's mass. He came from an era of mass media. He was the president of 20th Century Fox International. That's big media. That's really mass. And now he's the founder and executive director of the Cambodia Children's Fund, through which my family now sponsors Tang. She used to have to live in a garbage dump, and now her and her family don't. She gets to go to school, and life's a lot better for Tang. This is about bandwidth, right? Solving a lot of the problems out there. It requires us to have the space and capacity to do that. And we need to stop crowding our lives, or letting them be crowded by other people, and start making the choices that free up the space for us. So, when you see the big maddening crowd now, right, instead of thinking, get me out of here, what I want you to do is to say, no, I gotta look within the crowds, within these big communities, whether we find them online or offline in rooms like this. Look within it. 100 people, it's about that much, right? A little bit more than what's in the room here today. You're going to escape from this crowd by choosing the very best people that you can find. This is what today I challenge you to do. Escape from the maddening crowd. Thank you.